There are two kinds of people in quiet neighborhoods: those who mind their business, and those who believe it's their responsibility to watch everyone else's. On Briarwood Lane, everyone knew which one Karen Whitlock was. 45 years old, recently divorced, lived alone in a beige colonial on Briarwood Lane. She was the woman who noticed when your trash bins were late to the curb. The woman who memorized unfamiliar license plates. The woman who stood at her front window just a little too long when someone new moved in. She called it protecting the community. Some called it something else, but no one ever thought she was dangerous, until the night she was caught on camera. It was a Thursday, 11:42 p.m. cold, windless, the kind of suburban silence that feels staged. Across the street from Karen's beige two-story colonial sat the recently purchased home of Daniel Harper, 36 years old, software engineer, recently divorced, kept mostly to himself. He moved in 6 months earlier. Karen had already formed opinions. He's not friendly, she told her book club, always unloading things late at night. I've seen him carry boxes into the garage and lock it immediately. Boxes. Always boxes. Daniel rarely opened his garage during the day. When he did, it was brief, efficient, controlled. The inside remained mostly hidden. Karen noticed everything, and she hated not knowing. Karen didn't like unanswered questions, and Daniel was full of them. 3 weeks before the break-in, she began writing things down. License plate numbers, delivery truck times, dates. Daniel's garage light stayed on past midnight. She convinced herself it was normal. She convinced herself it was civic duty. But something else was growing. Obsession. On a Thursday night, Daniel left his house at 8:17 p.m. Karen watched him go. Black SUV. Headed east. She waited. 10 p.m., no return. 11 p.m., still gone. At 11:38 p.m., Karen stepped onto her porch. She wore dark leggings, a hooded sweatshirt, latex gloves. She told herself it was just to look, just to confirm, just to make sure nothing illegal was happening in her neighborhood. That's how these things always start. Daniel's driveway security camera activated at 11:42 p.m. The footage would later be slowed, enhanced, replayed dozens of times by investigators. It shows Karen walking across the street, keeping low near the hedges. She pauses once, scanning the windows. Then she reaches the side garage door and pulls a key from her pocket. Not a lockpick, a key. She hesitates only half a second before sliding it into the handle. The door opens. She disappears inside. The footage runs for 12 minutes. For 12 minutes, nothing moves. Then something changes. The interior garage light flickers on. A shadow crosses the frosted window panel. Then another. Karen had not gone in quietly. At 11:55 p.m., the door bursts open. Karen runs out. But she's not just running. She's panicked. Her hood has fallen back. Her face is pale, almost gray under the porch light. And in her right hand, she's holding something. Something small, metallic, reflective. She clutches it to her chest as she bolts across the street. At 11:56 p.m., Daniel Harper's SUV pulls back into the neighborhood. The next morning, the police are called. Not by Daniel, by Karen. She reports a suspicious disturbance in her neighbor's garage. She claims she heard banging, voices, something dangerous. She insists officers check immediately. She never mentions entering the garage. She never mentions the key. She never mentions what she took. But she doesn't know something crucial. Daniel saw the notification from his security app, and he has the footage. All of it. When officers review the recording that afternoon, the room goes quiet. Because this isn't trespassing curiosity. This is premeditated. The gloves, the key, the timing. And when they zoom in on the object in her hand as she flees, the metallic reflection becomes clearer. It isn't a tool. It isn't a weapon. It's a hard drive. An external storage device. Removed from inside Daniel's garage. Removed deliberately. Removed with purpose. When confronted, Karen denies everything. I would never break into someone's home, she says calmly. I was asleep. But she doesn't know the most chilling part of the footage. Inside the garage, mounted near the ceiling, was a secondary interior camera. It recorded everything she did, and what she saw, and why she panicked. But when investigators attempt to access the interior footage, the file is corrupted. Wiped at 12:03 a.m. 7 minutes after Karen fled, remotely, from inside the garage, which means one of two things. Either Daniel wiped it, or someone else was inside, and they didn't want anyone to see what happened. When detectives returned to Daniel's house that evening to question him further, the garage is empty, not just tidy, but the shelves are cleared, the workbench is gone, the storage bins are missing, and the spot where the interior camera had been mounted, ripped from the ceiling. The wires hang loose. Daniel stands calmly in the driveway as police arrive. He doesn't look nervous. He doesn't look angry. He looks resigned. And when asked about the hard drive Karen took, he says something that changes everything. She wasn't stealing, he tells them. She was retrieving it. But what exactly was on that hard drive? Why did Karen have a key? And if she wasn't stealing, who asked her to retrieve it? And most importantly, what was Daniel hiding in that garage? When Daniel Harper said she wasn't stealing, she was retrieving it, the entire tone of the investigation shifted. Detective Lena Morales didn't miss the detail. People who are innocent usually say, "She stole from me." They say, "I want to press charges." They don't say retrieving. Retrieving implies ownership, permission, prior agreement, and that meant Karen Whitlock might not be acting alone. The first crack in Karen's denial came quickly. Police obtained a warrant to search her home that same afternoon. They found the hoodie, the latex gloves in her trash, and inside her kitchen junk drawer, a labeled envelope, spare H. Inside was a garage key, not copied, not forced, original, cut and stamped by the manufacturer. When confronted, Karen's composure finally faltered. Her voice trembled for the first time. "I didn't break in," she said quietly. "He gave it to me." It started, according to Karen, on a rainy Tuesday evening. Daniel had come to her door, not with hostility, not with confrontation, but with concern. He said he thought someone had been trying to access his garage remotely, Karen told detectives. He said his system had been acting strange. He claimed his ex-wife had once tried to access his property after their divorce. He said he was worried. He said he needed someone trustworthy nearby. Someone who kept an eye on things. Karen had felt chosen, validated, important. "He asked me to hold on to a spare key," she explained, "just in case something happened." He also gave her something else, a reason. Daniel told her that inside his garage was a backup storage drive. Sensitive data, work-related, legal documents, personal files. He said if anything ever seemed wrong, strange lights, noises, alerts, she should retrieve it immediately. "Don't call me first," he allegedly told her. "Just secure it." And that's exactly what she did, or so she claimed. But something about her story didn't align. Because on the security footage, Karen didn't walk into that garage cautiously. She walked in like she knew exactly where the drive was located. No searching, no hesitation. Straight to the back wall workbench, left drawer, underneath a false panel. She reached in and removed the hard drive within 34 seconds. That wasn't curiosity, that was familiarity. The corrupted interior file became the central mystery. Forensics confirmed something chilling. The deletion wasn't random corruption. It was manual. Someone accessed the system locally and wiped the footage. At 12:03 a.m., 7 minutes after Karen ran out, which meant someone was still inside the garage after she fled. And before Daniel's SUV was seen pulling into the neighborhood. Timeline problem. Because Daniel's vehicle pinged a traffic camera 3 miles away at 11:59 p.m. So unless he could teleport, someone else had been there. Investigators pulled neighborhood camera feeds. 2 houses down from Daniel's property, a Ring camera caught something subtle at 11:37 p.m. A dark sedan parked briefly near the corner, headlights off, engine idling. At 11:58 p.m., it drove away, license plate partially obscured. Karen never mentioned a second car, but she also insisted she heard something inside the garage before entering. A thud, she'd said during her initial 911 call, like someone dropped something heavy. Detectives replayed her voice recording multiple times. She wasn't faking panic. It was real, raw, uncontrolled. Under pressure, Karen finally admitted something she'd been withholding. "When I opened the drawer and grabbed the drive, I heard breathing." The room had been dark except for the small overhead bulb Daniel kept near the workbench. She thought she was alone, until she wasn't. "I heard someone behind the shelves," she whispered. She said she turned, and for a second, she saw movement between stacked plastic storage bins. A figure, tall, watching her. She couldn't describe the face, only the eyes, reflective, like they were catching light. And then the overhead bulb flickered. When it came back on, the figure was gone. That's when she ran. When confronted with Karen's updated statement, Daniel didn't flinch. "You're asking me if someone was hiding in my garage?" he said, almost amused. "That's ridiculous." He claimed the hard drive contained only archived client backups from his freelance cybersecurity projects. Nothing illegal, nothing dangerous. When asked why the garage had been cleared overnight, his answer was simple: "I didn't feel safe." But Detective Morales noticed something subtle. His garage floor, though empty, had faint drag marks, as if something heavy had been moved recently and quickly. The device Karen retrieved was sent to digital forensics. What they found wasn't corporate data. It wasn't divorce records. It wasn't tax files. It was surveillance footage. Hundreds of clips, organized by date, labeled by address. Not just Daniel's house, other homes, within a 5-mile radius, including Karen's. But the most disturbing folder wasn't labeled with an address. It was labeled basement. Inside were grainy clips recorded from a low angle. Concrete floor, metal chair, chains bolted to a wall. And in one 5-second clip, a shadow moved across the frame. Not the camera, not a trick of light. A person, standing just out of view. Detective Morales closed the file and leaned back slowly. Because now the question wasn't whether Karen broke into a garage. The question was, what had she just interrupted? And who had wiped that interior footage? But before police could secure a warrant for a deeper property search, Daniel Harper disappeared. No packed bags, no digital trace, no outgoing flights. His SUV was found abandoned 2 counties away, and inside the trunk was a second hard drive, shattered, smashed with deliberate force. Karen thought she was protecting her neighborhood, but she may have just uncovered something far worse, because the surveillance footage on Daniel's drive showed more than empty rooms. In one clip, dated 3 days before the break-in, a woman appears in frame, blindfolded, seated in that same metal chair, and the timestamp reads, Briarwood Lane. Was Daniel running a hidden operation from his garage? Was someone else using his property without his knowledge? And why was Karen's house among the surveillance files? When Daniel Harper vanished, Briarwood Lane stopped feeling safe. Curtains stayed closed. Porch lights stayed on all night. And Karen Whitlock, once the neighborhood's self-appointed guardian, became the woman everyone watched instead. But Detective Lena Morales wasn't interested in gossip. She was interested in architecture. Daniel's home had been built in 1998. Standard suburban layout. 2 floors. Attached garage. No basement. At least, that's what the county record said. But the hard drive footage told a different story. Concrete walls. Exposed foundation. Low ceiling. Metal chair bolted into the floor. That wasn't a garage. And it wasn't any visible room in Daniel's house. So investigators brought in structural survey equipment. Ground-penetrating radar. Thermal scans. They started in the garage. Because if you're hiding something, you hide it where people assume nothing's there. The first sign was subtle. A sound. When a technician tapped the rear wall of the garage with a rubber mallet, the echo wasn't uniform. Most of the wall responded with a solid thud. But near the right-hand corner, there was a faint, hollow resonance, as if something existed behind it. The wall had been recently painted, and when they scraped near the baseboard, they found something even more suspicious. Fresh caulking over a seam. A seam that wasn't on the original blueprint. They cut into the drywall, and behind it was a steel panel. Industrial. Bolted. Not part of any residential design. Detective Morales felt her pulse climb. Open it. It took 27 minutes. Power tools. Pry bars. A cutting torch. When the final bolt snapped free, the steel panel swung inward, and cold air rushed out. There were stairs. Narrow. Steel. Concrete. Leading downward. Into a chamber that officially did not exist. The room was exactly like the footage. Concrete floor. Cinder block walls. Single overhead industrial bulb. And bolted in the center, the chair. Metal. With restraint points on the arms and ankles. But the chains were gone. Only the bolts remained. The air smelled faintly of bleach. Too clean. Someone had tried to sanitize this place. But they hadn't been thorough. Luminol testing revealed faint streaks along the floor. Drag patterns. And near the base of the chair, microscopic traces of blood. Not enough to indicate a crime scene on its own, but enough to confirm something violent had occurred. On the far wall, investigators found something unexpected. Not tools. Not torture equipment. Not weapons. Photographs. Printed. Dozens of them, pinned in careful rows. Neighborhood homes, front doors, driveways, backyards. And each photo had handwritten timestamps beneath it, including Karen's house, including the homes of 3 other women on the street, all living alone, all between the ages of 35 and 55, all recently divorced. This wasn't random. This was curated, targeted, studied. But the most chilling discovery wasn't physical. It was digital. In the corner of the hidden basement room, investigators found wiring embedded inside the cinder block wall, a concealed Ethernet cable, running upward, feeding into the garage's security system, which meant the interior footage wasn't just recording the garage, it was streaming from this room below. But here's the problem. The interior file was wiped at 12:03 a.m. 7 minutes after Karen fled the garage. And forensic timestamp analysis revealed something critical. The system wasn't accessed remotely. It was accessed from a terminal inside the basement, meaning whoever deleted the footage was physically in that room after Karen ran, and after Daniel's vehicle was confirmed miles away. When confronted with the discovery of the hidden basement, Karen broke down completely. But not in the way detectives expected. She didn't look shocked. She looked defeated. "There's no basement," she kept repeating. He said there wasn't. Detective Morales leaned forward. "When were you down there, Karen?" Silence. Her breathing changed. Shallow. Uneven. "I wasn't," she whispered. But the forensics team had already found something upstairs in her home. On her laptop. A saved Wi-Fi network. Harper_private_2 connected multiple times over the past month, including at 1:17 a.m. 3 weeks earlier. Karen finally admitted she'd entered the garage before, twice, at Daniel's request. He told her he needed help checking his server equipment. He claimed he wasn't comfortable going down there alone at night. That was the first time she saw the stairs, the first time she saw the room, the first time she saw the chair. "He told me it was for role-play recordings," she said, trembling. "Consensual adult content." She wanted to believe it, so she did. The woman in the hard drive footage, the blindfolded one seated in the chair. She had been reported missing 3 days before the break-in. Her name was Elise Monroe, 42, divorced, lived 2 streets over, and her last known location pinned, within 300 feet of Daniel Harper's house. Karen stared at the photograph of Elise. Her hands shook so violently she dropped it. "That's not possible," she whispered. But it was. Because investigators had already pulled cell tower triangulation data. And on the night Elise disappeared, Karen's phone had also pinged within 300 feet of Daniel's property. At 10:12 p.m., 2 hours before Elise's phone signal went dark, Detective Morales felt the entire case tilt. Because now Karen wasn't just the concerned neighbor. She wasn't just the accomplice who retrieved a hard drive. She was there, before the disappearance, before the basement footage was wiped, before Daniel fled. And then forensics delivered one final detail. The blood trace in the basement? It didn't match Elise. It matched Karen Whitlock. Why was Karen's blood in the hidden basement? Why was her phone near Daniel's house before Elise vanished? And if Daniel wasn't home when the footage was deleted, who was in that room? When the lab confirmed the blood in the hidden basement belonged to Karen Whitlock, the investigation didn't just shift, it was inverted. Up until that moment, Karen had been obsessive, intrusive, possibly manipulated. Now she was physically connected to the room beneath Daniel Harper's garage, a room that wasn't supposed to exist, a room containing a restraint chair, a room tied to a missing woman. Detective Lena Morales stared at the lab report for a long time before walking into interview room 2. Karen looked smaller than before, less righteous, less certain, but not surprised. That was what unsettled Morales most. "It was an accident," Karen said before the detective even sat down. Morales didn't speak. Karen swallowed. "The second time I went down there, I tripped on the bottom stair. I cut my hand on something metal. Something like restraints?" Morales asked evenly. Karen's jaw tightened. He said it was for content. For people who wanted to be filmed anonymously. "You believe that?" "I wanted to." That answer hung in the room. Forensics had already uncovered something Karen didn't know yet. The blood traces in the basement weren't from a single incident. There were multiple microscopic deposits, different aging markers, meaning Karen had been in that room more than twice, possibly many times. When confronted with that detail, she closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, something had shifted. "You're looking at this wrong," she said quietly. "Then help me look at it right," Morales replied. Elise Monroe had been missing for 9 days. Her car was found abandoned at a grocery store parking lot. Her purse still inside. Her phone powered off. No signs of struggle. No witnesses. Except for one unsettling detail. Security footage from a nearby street camera showed Elise's car passing Briarwood Lane at 9:58 p.m. the night she disappeared. It never exited the neighborhood on camera. It simply vanished from the grid. When technicians re-examined Daniel's garage footage from prior weeks, they enhanced something subtle. On 3 separate nights before Elise disappeared, Karen was visible in Daniel's driveway. After 10 p.m., not just standing outside, entering with a key, and leaving hours later. Those visits were never mentioned in her original statement. When asked why, Karen's voice lost its steadiness. "Because I knew how it would look." "How does it look, Karen?" She hesitated, like I was helping him. Detective Morales changed tactics. She placed a printed still image on the table. The blindfolded woman in the chair, head tilted slightly downward, wrist restrained, the timestamp visible in the corner. Karen didn't recoil. She leaned in, and for just half a second, her expression wasn't horror, it was recognition. "You've seen this before," Morales said. Karen's lips parted slightly. "No. You just reacted like someone recognizing a photograph." Silence. Then Karen did something no one expected. She laughed. It wasn't hysterical. It wasn't manic. It was bitter. "You think I was helping him?" she said softly. "You think I was some submissive little accomplice?" Morales said nothing. Karen leaned forward. "You're asking the wrong question. Ask why there are no fingerprints on the chair," Karen continued. "There should be." Daniel was sloppy with everything else. Cameras, wiring, storage drives. But the chair? Morales blinked. She hadn't mentioned fingerprints. Karen smiled faintly. "You didn't find any, did you?" The detective didn't answer. Because it was true. The chair had been wiped clean. Professionally. Not recently. Consistently. Over time. Karen's composure began to unravel, but not into panic. Into confession. "He wasn't the one who brought Elise down there," she said. The air in the room felt thinner. "What are you saying?" Morales asked carefully. Karen's eyes were glassy now. "He built the room. He wired the cameras. He thought he was in control." "Of what?" "Of me." That word landed heavy. Karen and Daniel hadn't just been neighbors. They'd been involved. Briefly. Quietly. After his divorce. After her own. 2 lonely houses. 1 quiet street. Late-night conversations turned into wine. Wine turned into something more. "He liked control," Karen said flatly. "Not in the way you're thinking. He liked psychological control. He'd confided in her. About humiliation. About feeling powerless during his marriage. About fantasies. Not violence. Power dynamics. Filming. Dominant scenarios." Karen claimed she ended it when she saw the basement room for the first time. "I thought it was just fantasy," she whispered, "until he showed me how real it could be." According to Karen, Daniel had called her at 9:40 p.m., told her he had someone, said she needed to see him. Proof she understood. Proof she wasn't going to judge him. Karen drove over. Her phone pinged near his house at 10:12 p.m. She went inside, down the stairs, and saw Elise, blindfolded, struggling, alive. Karen insisted she panicked. She said she told Daniel it was too far, that he needed to let her go. Daniel allegedly refused. They argued, and during the argument, Karen cut her hand trying to remove one of the restraints. The blood, her blood, in the basement. "But that's not the part you're going to believe," Karen said quietly. "Which part?" Morales asked. Karen's eyes met hers directly. "The part where I left." Because if Karen left, and Daniel left, who deleted the footage at 12:03 a.m.? Who was still in the basement? And why was there no sign of forced exit? Morales stood slowly. "Where is Elise now?" Karen's face went completely blank. "I don't know. Is she alive?" Pause. "Too long. I don't know." Just as the interrogation reached its breaking point, a forensic analyst knocked on the observation room glass. Morales stepped out. The analyst's voice was low, controlled. "We reran the basement audio feed from a secondary buffer server," he said. There was still residual data. And there's a voice in the background during the deletion timestamp. Morales felt the world narrow. Whose voice? The analyst hesitated. It's not Daniel. A beat. And it's not male. Inside the basement at 12:03 a.m., as the footage was manually erased, a woman's voice can be heard whispering, "Now you know how it feels." The audio enhancement team played the recovered clip 3 times. The whisper was faint, almost lost beneath static and the low electrical hum of the basement light. But it was clear enough. A woman's voice, calm, measured, whispering, "Now you know how it feels." Detective Lena Morales stood motionless as the final playback ended. "Run voice comparison," she ordered. They already had samples from Karen. They had hours of interrogation footage. It didn't take long. The result came back at 87% probability match. Not definitive in court, but strong. Very strong. When Morales returned to the interrogation room, Karen looked different. Less anxious, almost settled. As if something inevitable had finally arrived. Morales placed a small speaker on the table. Pressed play. The whisper filled the room. Karen didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. "You recognize that voice?" Morales asked. Karen tilted her head slightly. "It sounds tired," she said. "Is it yours?" A long silence. Then, yes. The air changed instantly. Not with chaos, with clarity. "Why were you in the basement after midnight, Karen?" She exhaled slowly. "Because I never left." That sentence rewrote everything. Karen began speaking in a steady, almost clinical tone. She and Daniel's relationship hadn't ended when she claimed it had. It evolved. Daniel liked psychological dominance. Control through fear. Through secrecy. Through watching. But what he didn't understand was that Karen liked control too. Just differently. She didn't crave domination. She craved leverage. When Daniel first showed her the basement, she was horrified. Not by the room. By how careless he was. "He documented everything," she said. "He recorded his own crimes. He trusted her. Too much. He confided. He bragged. He believed she was enthralled. Instead, she was studying him." Karen admitted that before Elise, there had been another woman. A name. Briefly held. Released. Daniel framed it as consensual. But Karen saw fear. Real fear. That was when she realized something crucial. Daniel wasn't a mastermind. He was reckless, impulsive, sloppy, and that meant eventually he would get caught, and anyone tied to him would go down too, including her. The night Elise was brought into the basement, Karen did go over at 10:12 p.m. She saw Elise restrained, she saw panic, and she saw something else. Daniel wasn't in control anymore. He was spiraling, talking too fast, sweating, drinking. This wasn't fantasy. This was escalation. Karen confronted him. They argued. She cut her hand trying to unlock the restraint. But she didn't leave. Not then. Not really. "I told him to step outside," Karen said. Morales leaned forward. "For what?" "To calm down." Daniel resisted at first. But Karen knew how to manipulate him. She always had. She framed it as support. A strategy. She convinced him that if Elise was going to be released, they needed to stage it carefully. He stepped outside. To think. To smoke. To breathe. And while he was gone, Karen closed the basement door. Locked it. From the outside. At 12:03 a.m., Karen accessed the basement terminal. She deleted the interior footage. Not to protect Daniel. To protect herself. Because she realized something else in that moment. If Daniel was caught alone, he would talk. He would implicate her. So she needed leverage. She needed insurance. The drive in the garage wasn't random. Karen knew exactly where it was. Because weeks earlier she had made a copy. Daniel thought he was archiving footage for himself. He didn't know Karen had duplicated segments. Clips. Enough to destroy him. Enough to control him. The night she ran from the garage on camera? That wasn't panic. Not entirely. It was staged. She needed it to look chaotic. She needed the neighborhood to see her as alarmed. Not complicated. Morales felt the pieces sliding into place. "You called the police the next morning," she said. "Yes." "To create distance." "Yes." "And Daniel disappeared because..." Karen's expression shifted slightly. A flicker. "Because this was the part she didn't fully control." "I didn't tell him to run," she said quietly. "Daniel didn't vanish because he was afraid of the police. He vanished because he discovered something missing. Not the drive Karen took. Something else. When investigators re-examined the basement wiring, they found evidence of a secondary hidden recording system. Independent. Offline. A failsafe Daniel had installed without telling Karen. It captured everything, including her locking him out of the basement, including her whisper at 12:03 a.m., including something else. Something Karen didn't know had been recorded. Morales slid a final photo across the table. It wasn't from the hard drive. It wasn't from Daniel's system. It was from a roadside traffic camera. Timestamp, 2:17 a.m. Daniel's SUV. The passenger door opened, and in the frame, Karen. Standing beside him, Karen stared at the image, and for the first time, she looked genuinely shaken. "You said he left on his own," Morales said quietly. Karen didn't answer. "Where did you go at 2:17 a.m.? Silence. "Where is Daniel Harper?" Karen's jaw tightened. "You're asking the wrong question again." Morales didn't blink. "Then tell me the right one." Karen leaned back slowly. "You should be asking where Elise is." Search teams found something in a wooded area 6 miles outside town. Not a body, a shallow grave, recently disturbed. Except for torn rope fibers and a blindfold. Karen looked directly at Morales. "You think I'm the villain?" she said softly. "You think Daniel was the predator?" Possible. "But you still haven't figured it out." "Figured what out?" Morales asked. Karen's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Elise wasn't taken." The room went very, very still. She volunteered. Detective Lena Morales didn't react. But inside, the case detonated. Because if Elise wasn't a victim, then this wasn't a kidnapping. And if this wasn't a kidnapping, then what exactly had Karen broken into that garage to retrieve? Elise Monroe's disappearance had followed a pattern. Abandoned car, personal belongings left behind, phone powered off. It looked like an abduction. But now investigators re-examined something subtle. Elise had withdrawn $9,000 in cash 2 days before she vanished. She had deleted several social media accounts. And she had searched one specific phrase repeatedly in the weeks prior. How to disappear legally. When confronted with that, Karen didn't smirk. She nodded. "Elise wanted out," she said calmly. "Out of what?" Morales asked. "Everything." 6 months earlier, after Daniel's divorce and Karen's own unraveling marriage, the two of them had fallen into something dangerous. Not romance, not partnership, collaboration. Daniel had the technical skill, security systems, encrypted storage, anonymous servers. Karen had something more powerful. People, trust, access. She was the woman neighbors confided in, the one who knew who was struggling financially, who was depressed, who was drowning in debt, who whispered, "I wish I could just disappear." Karen listened, and then, sometimes, she offered a solution. It wasn't human trafficking. It wasn't ransom. It was something stranger. They staged disappearances, carefully, for a price. New identities weren't fabricated through fantasy-level spy networks. They were simpler. Cash transactions, out-of-state relocation, dead-end trails, digital erasure. Daniel handled the technical wipe. Karen handled recruitment. They called it resetting. No violence, no coercion, only clients who asked, at least in the beginning. The basement wasn't a torture chamber. It was staged. Blindfolds to avoid location recognition. Restraints to create believable distress footage. Security clips deliberately leaked later to imply foul play. Because if someone vanished cleanly, police searched harder. But if someone looked abducted, investigations chased ghosts. The chair wasn't about cruelty. It was about credibility. Elise Monroe had been drowning in medical debt after her divorce. She had no close family nearby. She wanted to leave, not just the town, her identity. Karen introduced her to Daniel. They explained the process. Stage fear. Disappear publicly. Re-emerge privately elsewhere. Elise agreed. Signed paperwork. Transferred cash. Everything is consensual. Everything planned. Except for one problem. Daniel started recording more than necessary. Keeping footage. Archiving reactions. Storing emotional moments. Not for business. For himself. He liked watching the fear. Even if it was staged. And that's when Karen realized something. The service wasn't his thrill. The fear was. Karen didn't trust him anymore. Not with leverage like that. If he ever felt cornered, he could release everything. Expose the operation. Implicate her. So she started copying files. Quietly. Building insurance. The night of the garage break-in wasn't random curiosity. It was the execution of a contingency plan. Daniel had told her earlier that week he was thinking of expanding. Taking on clients who hadn't explicitly volunteered. People who need to be removed, he'd said. Karen knew that tone. She'd heard it before. Escalation. Obsession. Control slipping. The night Elise was staged in the basement, everything was supposed to follow protocol. But Daniel went off script. He tightened the restraints too much. Ignored the safe word they'd established. Extended recording time. Elise panicked for real. Karen saw the shift immediately. This wasn't a performance anymore. It was an indulgence. That's why she locked him out. That's why she deleted the footage. Not to protect the business. To stop him. The traffic camera image of Karen beside Daniel's SUV wasn't a secret meeting. It was a final confrontation. She'd followed him after he discovered files missing. He was angry, unstable, threatening to burn everything down. According to Karen, Daniel drove to the wooded area where staged burials were sometimes prepared for realism. He accused her of betrayal, of stealing from him, of sabotaging the operation. They argued, and then he realized something. Karen had copies. He had no leverage left. Daniel Harper didn't vanish because Karen killed him. He vanished because he ran. Not from police, from exposure. Investigators later found digital traces of cryptocurrency movement tied to Daniel's accounts, transferred overseas. Within hours of the confrontation, he had contingency funds, false documentation prepared long ago. The man who built disappearances simply executed one for himself. 3 days after Karen's interrogation, a woman walked into a small-town DMV office in Arizona. New haircut, different hair color, new name. She presented legitimate documentation, birth certificate, social security number, all recently issued, plain, legal, painstakingly prepared. That woman was Elise Monroe. So what was the crime? Conspiracy, identity fraud, obstruction, evidence tampering, but not kidnapping, not murder. The basement looked monstrous, because it was designed to. The security footage was meant to horrify, because horror makes people stop looking deeper. As Karen was formally charged, Detective Morales asked her one final question. If this was consensual, why call the police at all? Karen smiled faintly. Because Daniel was slipping, she said, and I needed the operation shut down before someone really got hurt. You could have just walked away. No, Karen said softly. He would have escalated. Morales studied her carefully. You're painting yourself as the one who stopped him. Karen held her gaze. Maybe I did. Karen Whitlock accepted a plea deal. Reduced sentence in exchange for cooperation. Daniel Harper remains at large. Interpol has flagged his identity, but no confirmed sightings. The hidden basement was demolished. The garage was rebuilt. Briarwood Lane returned to its quiet routine, but sometimes late at night, neighbors say they still feel watched. Not by Karen, not by Daniel, but by the idea that someone might know exactly who wants to disappear, and exactly how to make it happen. Because the scariest crimes aren't always violent. Sometimes, they're voluntary. And the most disturbing part? If Karen hadn't broken into that garage, no one would have ever known the service even existed.